100% tariff on electric vehicles from China, 25% tariff on Chinese steel, and a reduction in the number of temporary foreign workers.
I'm extremely disappointed with respect to the decision that the country of China has made in further increasing their temporary tariffs on our canola seeds, which will add to the existing tariffs on canola oil and meal.
Returning to our top story today, and that is China's ambassador to Canada saying canola tariffs will be dropped if Canada drops its tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles.
Hey, welcome back to my channel. Something unusual just happened, and it's changing the tone of global trade. On October 1st, 2024, Canada did something few expected. It slapped a 100% tariff on electric vehicles from China, along with a 25% duty on Chinese steel and aluminum. To the casual observer, it looked like just another trade headline. But behind the scenes, this was a calculated move, one that could redefine how Canada competes in the 21st century economy. Ottawa framed it as a response to what it called China's deliberate overcapacity strategy, a policy that floods markets with low-priced goods, driving competitors out before setting the rules. Yet, for Canada, this wasn't just about defending its factories. It was about asserting control over the next generation of clean energy industries, from EV batteries to critical minerals. The risks are obvious: higher prices, potential retaliation, and uncertainty for automakers already navigating global supply chain chaos. But for many in Ottawa, it was worth it. A rare moment where Canada wasn't just reacting to someone else's policy, but setting one of its own. Could this be the beginning of Canada's industrial awakening, or the first spark of a trade war that burns both sides? Before we dive in, tap that like button. It tells YouTube this content matters. But Beijing didn't stay silent for long. Just 5 months after Ottawa's bold tariff move, China struck back, not in factories or tech, but in the vast fields of Saskatchewan and Alberta. On March 20th, 2025, Beijing announced a sweeping set of retaliatory tariffs targeting more than $2.6 billion worth of Canadian agricultural exports. The message was clear: if Canada wanted to play hardball on electric cars, China would hit where it hurt most: the farm economy. More than $1 billion in canola and peas now faced a 100% import duty, while another $1.6 billion in pork and seafood saw a 25% tariff increase. For farmers, it was a direct blow. Just a year earlier, canola exports to China had reached $3.7 billion, accounting for more than half of Canada's global shipments. Overnight, that market began to vanish. The move wasn't entirely unexpected. Months earlier, in September 2024, Beijing had already launched an anti-dumping investigation into Canadian canola, a warning shot that many hoped would stay on paper. But it didn't. And now, what began as a high-tech tariff dispute was spilling into the heart of Canada's breadbasket. Farm groups warned the short-term losses could exceed $1.2 billion, yet Ottawa showed no sign of backing down. Officials framed it as the price of long-term independence, a necessary cost on the path to industrial sovereignty. Still, the question lingers: how much can a middle power endure before economic resilience turns into economic strain? If you've made it this far, consider subscribing. It's how we keep uncovering what others won't say. Yet instead of retreating under pressure, Ottawa doubled down. What began as a trade confrontation was now evolving into something more deliberate: a blueprint for industrial self-reliance. For Prime Minister Mark Carney, the agricultural backlash wasn't a setback. It was a turning point. His government began treating the crisis not as a punishment, but as a rare chance to redefine Canada's economic model for a new era. Carney framed the issue bluntly: China does not share Canada's trade values. To him, that statement wasn't about ideology, it was about structure. Canada's economy had long depended on branch operations of foreign firms, a system that brought jobs but left little innovation or research at home. Economists called it the branch plant problem, an invisible ceiling that kept Canadian industry perpetually dependent. In response, Foreign Minister Melanie Joly unveiled a new investment strategy centered on transparency, regulatory predictability, and long-term confidence, an attempt to make Canada not just a safe market, but a credible industrial base. Ottawa began urging automakers like Volkswagen to source more steel and aluminum domestically, tying future incentives to the use of Canadian materials. Jolie went further. In a policy speech that drew global attention, she proposed reusing EV batteries for defense applications, turning civilian technology into a national strategic asset. It was a subtle but telling signal. Canada wasn't just adapting to tariffs, it was learning to weaponize resilience. Through it all, one question began to take shape. Could a nation built on compromise now find strength in confrontation? As trade routes with Beijing narrowed, Ottawa began quietly redrawing its map of opportunity. Instead of chasing low-cost supply chains, Canada started building alliances based on shared principles and technological depth. Prime Minister Mark Carney called it a pivot from price to values, a strategic realignment that stretched from Tokyo to Seoul, where democratic governance and advanced manufacturing go hand in hand. In Tokyo, discussions centered on critical minerals and clean energy, with Japan viewing Canada as a stable supplier in a volatile world. In Seoul, the tone was different but equally pragmatic. The Canada-South Korea partnership was described as strategically complementary. Canada brings natural resources and reliability, while Korea offers innovation and high-tech expertise. Together, they could build an EV ecosystem resilient to geopolitical shocks. At the same time, Ottawa expanded its naval and defense presence in the Indo-Pacific, signaling that this wasn't just economic diversification, it was strategic positioning. Foreign Minister Melanie Joly even floated the idea of using Canadian battery technology in submarine and defense systems, blurring the line between industrial policy and national security. And as Asia opened its doors, Europe followed suit. Canada signed multi-billion-dollar agreements with European partners to reinforce EV supply chains and reduce dependence on China's raw materials. What began as retaliation and resistance was slowly turning into reconstruction, a reimagining of Canada's role in a world no longer defined by cheap production, but by trusted collaboration. By this point, it was clear that Canada's 100% tariff wasn't just a barrier. It was bait. Hidden beneath the politics was a strategic offer. The 100% duty applied only to Chinese-made EVs, but any automaker willing to build in Canada or a third country would be exempt. The message was unmistakable. If you want to sell here, produce here. Instead of keeping goods out, Ottawa used tariffs to pull investment in. The 2024 federal budget reinforced this with tax credits for EV supply chains, signaling that the policy was as much about growth as it was about defense. The strategy paid off. In Ontario, Honda unveiled a $15 billion Canadian complex that will produce batteries and vehicles on-site in partnership with POSCO and Asahi Kasei. Together, they're building an end-to-end EV ecosystem within Canada's borders. For Ottawa, it proved a point. Tariffs, when designed carefully, can do more than punish. They can rewrite where the next generation of industry takes shape. While Washington and Beijing remained locked in a costly tariff standoff, Ontario was quietly writing a different story, one of opportunity. Amid global trade turbulence, the province began to emerge as the new heart of North America's electric vehicle industry. At the center of it stands Honda's $15 billion Canadian project, designed to produce up to 240,000 EVs a year and 36 gigawatt-hours of batteries by 2028. By integrating everything, from raw materials to final assembly, the plant is expected to cut production costs by nearly 20%, making it one of the most efficient EV operations in the Western world. Ottawa backed the effort with $1.8 billion in tax credits, ensuring that Canada could stay competitive with U.S. and European subsidies. And investors took notice. Dozens of European and South Korean companies have since signed memorandums of understanding to join the growing supply network, from cathode materials to battery recycling. Piece by piece, Canada is shaping what many now call the Battery Valley of North America, a quiet rival to Michigan and Texas, built not on volume or slogans, but on stability, partnerships, and long-term vision. In the end, Canada's 100% tariff remains what it has been from the start, a gamble. In the short term, the policy could shave 0.3 to 0.5% off GDP, largely from lost agricultural exports and supply disruptions. But the bet Ottawa is making isn't about this quarter or next year. It's about redefining how a mid-sized economy can stand firm among giants. If the strategy works, Canada will have turned vulnerability into leverage. Industrial investment is already surging, and Beijing, once seen as an untouchable trading force, has been forced to diversify its own canola imports, revealing a subtle but significant reversal of pressure. Under Prime Minister Mark Carney's soft autonomy approach, Canada isn't choosing between Washington and Beijing. It's learning how to navigate between them. Step by step, Canada is carving out an identity as a small nation with big capability, one that Europe and Japan increasingly view as a reliable industrial partner. But whether this new model becomes a blueprint for others, or simply a temporary experiment in resilience, will depend on how long Canada can sustain both its conviction and its costs. So, what do you think? Is this the start of a new era of middle power independence, or just a high-stakes wager in a world that punishes hesitation? Thanks for watching. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Every click fuels the truth.